Assalamu alaikum. We begin with lecture 22 now, and I will take up the next portion of the poem A Grammarian's Funeral with you. I looked at the first part of the poem with you in the previous lecture, and we saw how the disciples of the grammarian, of this particular master, of their master, how the disciples, or one particular disciple, was so full of praise for him. And we saw how in great esteem these disciples or these students kept their master. Sorry. We saw in what great esteem these students or these disciples held their master. We are going to take up from we left in the last lecture, and I will go through the rest of the text with you in this lecture, and then we shall see what are the different themes that emerge from this poem. So let's take a look at the text, and let's start from where we left in the previous lecture. The lines begin from the second part here, and we have the words, lines first in the brackets. Browning tells us, here's the town gate reached, there's the marketplace gaping before us. Now he's only describing while the speaker is talking, he's describing to you what he's passing through. He can see the empty places around them because people were still asleep, because it was still night time. Yeah, this in him was the peculiar grace, hearten our course. That before living he'd learn how to live, no end to learning. So he's mixing the two up. The journey still continues. The students, the disciples are still carrying his body upon their shoulders. They're singing all in one voice to the glory of their master. And this particular disciple is telling us the way in which their master spent his life. So he gives us a further insight into the life. He says, in him something was peculiar about him. The most peculiar grace in my master was that before living he would learn how to live. No end to learning. We talked about this earlier also, that the grammarian believes in planning. He believed in deciding beforehand what is to come, or how we are to behave, or what are we to do in future. So he was not like the ordinary people who live every moment of life without thinking, without planning. He believed in planning, and he believed in planning because he believed in life after death. He believed that we need to plan every step here in this world, because that is going to decide our future, that is the life after death. So he gave serious thinking, and he gave serious planning to his life here in the world. So before living, he would learn how to live. He was not like the rest of us who gave no thought to any action of theirs, but he thought hard before doing something, and because he also believed that there was no end to learning. So again, there is this link to his knowledge, that knowledge and learning for him was everything. And for everything he need to learn, and he need to be a master of all arts. This was their master's desire. Earn the means first, God surely will contrive use for our earning. Others mistrust and say, but time escapes, live now or never. Now the grammarian's words are still continuing. He says, earn the means first. God surely will contrive use for our earning. So he says, first we need to make means. We have to earn the means. We have to find the means. We have to find the ways to achieve our goal. We have to find the right way. We have to find the right knowledge. We have to have the right learning. We have to have the right knowledge first. And then, with the grace of God, with the help from God, he says, we will also find a use for this learning. So his belief was that no knowledge and no learning was without its purpose, was without any significance. So he says we have to acquire knowledge at every stage. We have to acquire knowledge at every step, because with knowledge comes God's help, and with God's help we can then find ways to make use of our knowledge and how to make life a better life. Others mistrust and say, and then he says that there are others who don't believe this, who don't believe that knowledge and learning can be useful, who think that there were other things in life that got them more profits, that got them more luxuries, that got them more material progress, and they were more important. So while the whole world ran after money, ran after the materialistic needs, and ran after their comforts, were running off around building their secure homes, and were engrossed in their own lives, this particular grammarian believed that the knowledge or the attainment of knowledge was superior to any other gain, to all the other kinds of worldly forms of gains. He says, others would say, but time escapes, live now and never. So while the grammarian's approach was that we have to acquire knowledge, we have to learn the art, and then with God's help, he says, we will find a way to make use of it. We will find a way to fulfill our needs. The others did not believe that. They believed that it is only time matters. Time is all important. So if we waste our time in acquiring knowledge and learning new things, he says, we shall never be happy in our present life. We shall never find the comforts in the present life. So live now and never. This was a philosophy of these other people. They believed that we are either living in the present. There's no point in planning for a future we don't know of. There's no point in working towards the future that will come after our death, after we're dead. We don't know, we cannot see that life. We're not even sure about that life. We're not even sure what it will be like in our future. So it is not important to waste our time planning for the future or doing something for the future. What is important is to make gains, is to make profits, is to make our life comfortable for the present, because it is now or never. So the grammarian's approach, as you can see, was totally opposite to the approach of the common people. He said, what's time? Leave now for dogs and apes, man has forever. These are really important idiomatic words. The grammarian said, what's time? Because the common, the ignorant people, they emphasize time, the now. They said now or never. It's now, it's a present time, or it's never. So what we achieve now, the way we are spending time now, that is important. So gaining knowledge, living a tough life, working hard, that is not something that brings joy. So it's not what they think that is significant. But the grammarian says, what is time? Leave now for dogs and apes, man has forever. He says, don't. An important message that he gives to these people, that he used to give to these people, was that man does not even only have now. He has forever. Man has forever. The past was for him, the present is for him, and the future is his. So he says it is only dogs and apes, it's only animals, it's only animal kingdom which lives in the present, which goes for the present desires, which hearkens after the physical desire, satisfaction of the physical desires, or which goes after the satisfaction of the primal desires. And they go for comfort, food, water, and other necessary needs. He says these needs and desires and passions, even animals fulfill them. And these are, the present moment is for the animal. An animal does not plan for his future. An animal cannot see ahead. An animal cannot think. An animal is not made to have acquire knowledge. But he says man's world doesn't end. Man's name lives. Man himself lives through his work, through the knowledge, through the learning that he passes on. So man has forever. He has all the times, the present, the past, and the future. Back to his books then. Deeper drooped his head. Calculus racked him. Leaden before his eyes grew dross of lead. Tussis attacked him. So what did he do? What did the grammarian do? How did he pass his old age? Engrossed in his books. He would always be found improving upon his knowledge, increasing his learning, and through new books that he found. The disciple tells us, deeper drooped his head, and his head drooped heavily upon the book, because remember his eyes were also diseased, so he naturally had to look closely upon the book in order to read what it said. Calculus, you know, is part of mathematics. It has to do mathematics. So even in his old age, he troubled his mind over mathematics, over the mathematical study of change. So he enjoyed this activity, even with his feeble mind, with his feeble eyesight. He worked at calculus. Leaden before his eyes grew dross of lead. And so with his feeble eyes, again he says, tussis, this is a technical term for cough and medicine. He would even spare time for the study of medicine. So look at the kind of scholar he was. What a great scholar he was. He is a grammarian, but we see that he also studies mathematics. He studies medicine. So he, for him, learning and knowledge is for all men. It is for, and it is forever. It's not restricted to a particular age. It is not for the young ones only. It is for all ages. It is for all times, and it lives on. As it, when you pass it on, it lives on. It never dies. Then he says, now, master, take a little rest. Naughty, caution redoubled, step two abreast, the way winds narrowly, not a whit troubled. Now the disciple says that we would sometimes tell our master to take a little rest. He says, now master, take a little rest. When they would see their master brooding over books, reading those books with difficulty, and destroying his own health, they would try and caution him. They would try and stop him. But they would say, but the disciple says that no, he wouldn't stop. He would not relinquish work. He would not relinquish hard work. Because why? Because his eyesight was not focused on the present. It was not the present worries, problems, diseases which bothered him. His eyes were fixed on the future. Caution redoubled, step two abreast. He says, but what did he do? He would work even harder. He would go a step further. The way winds narrowly, and he would wind his way through hard work to achieve and increase his knowledge. Not a whit troubled. The disciple tells us he was not troubled, he was not bothered by our caution. Back to his studies, fresher than at first. Fierce as a dragon, he, soul hydroptic, with a sacred thirst, sucked at the flagon. And what did the master do? He went back to his studies. Fresher than at first, fiercer than at first. So when when his disciples cautioned him or told him to take rest, he did the exact opposite. He felt and he understood that they were cautioning him because they saw that his physical end or mortal body is soon to be consumed, it's soon to die. So he would redouble his efforts to improve his knowledge, to get greater knowledge, to get more knowledge. And here we are offered a simile. He is described as fierce as a dragon. A dragon is a creature, it's normally a mythical creature, with a long tail and with huge wings. It can fly also, but the important thing is that it's not when he breathes the flames or air, the fire, he breathes out fire or flame when he breathes. So he's describing him as fierce as a dragon. And dragons can, when they're thirsty actually, they can empty the whole lake. They can, because the fire is always burning inside him, so they can drink loads of water. So he's describing this quality of thirst for knowledge of the grammarian, and he's comparing that thirst with the thirst of the dragon. He says, he soul hydroptic. Hydroptic means thirsty. His soul was thirsty with a sacred thirst. This is important, you should remember it. The thirst for knowledge is described here as a sacred thirst. So his thirst was a sacred thirst because it had a sacred purpose, because it had a goal, because it was meant for a reason, because it was meant for enlightenment of others, because it was meant for the improvement of the community, because it was not self-centered. Because knowledge is not for one, knowledge is for the whole community. Knowledge or learning improves the character of the whole society, and it improves the living standards of the whole society. So it is a sacred thing, it's a sacred thirst. And sucked at the flagon. Flagon is it's like a pitcher, it's a large vessel, it normally has a handle also, it's got a long handle, and it's like it's sometimes a vase shape, but like a jar or a jug you can call it, and it's used for a drink. So he's describing him how he would his soul thirsty for knowledge. He would drink more and more, he would read more and more books. And the comparison here is with the greatness of this master and with the ordinary individuals like us. Like the ordinary people who drink water when they're thirsty, like the dragon, but the grammarian, he would drink knowledge. So he's compared here to this mythical sacred creature. In the southeastern, especially in the Chinese culture, dragons are considered to be sacred. They have sacred powers, and they act as gods also in their myth. So a dragon is a sacred creature. So linking the dragon here with that of the grammarian, Browning is trying to show here, in fact the disciple is trying to show us here how holy the grammarian was also, how sacred his mission was also, and how noble and how sacred his desire to acquire knowledge was. Oh, if we draw a circle premature, heedless of far gain, greedy for quick returns of profit, sure bad is a bargain. Now he draws up another image. He says, what do we do? What do ordinary people do? What do? They are always expecting quick returns of profit. They do not plan far ahead. They don't make long-term plannings. They want quick return of profit. They want to have short-term gains. They want to achieve everything quickly. They want to make profit quickly. They want to improve their lives, their materialistic needs quickly. So he says, while the ordinary people are greedy for quick returns of profit, while they are greedy for quick returns, they acquire degrees, they acquire a qualification, and then they want a quick return of profit because they have spent money while acquiring education. And what do they want then? Then they want jobs, good jobs, attractive jobs. So the idea is the same. They want the quick return of the profits, whatever they have. They don't improve their qualification, to improve their knowledge, to increase their learning, but it is only with the aim of what it will get them, what it will give them. So theirs is a limited, narrow kind of knowledge and learning, with no broader or higher aims, only with immediate, short-term, narrow objectives. And those objectives are only there to improve their own living standards. It has got nothing to do with improving the lifestyle or the community or the society. No, it's only and only focused on their own selfish needs. Just as what we see happening around ourselves. The whole nation is only acquiring degrees without learning, without actual knowledge. And you see, they only want, and once a degree is in hand, no matter how poor the knowledge is, they want, because they have spent money in attaining that degree, they want a quick profit also. They want a quick return of that money also. And so the knowledge goes wasted, the learning goes wasted. There is no thirst for actual knowledge or learning. And that is how the disciple here is differentiating the ordinary with these blessed few noble ones, the real intellectuals. And in the last part he says, sure, bad is our bargain. He says, for this bargain, setting short-term goals of achieving profits, he says, this is a bad bargain. We have made a bad bargain. We ordinary people, he says, we made bad bargain because we only get these small profits. But he says the grammarian has set a higher ambition. We are heedless of far gain. The far gain is you should underline it. The heedless of far gain. Far gain here means the life hereafter, or the blessings of God. So he says we fix our gaze, we fix our eyes on the short-term profits, on the profits that we get from this world, the pleasures that we can get from the world. But a sage person, a wise man, sets his eyes upon the far gain, which is the life hereafter. So he, whatever he does in this life, it is he does not expect to be rewarded for those for his acts here in this world. He expects to be rewarded in the hereafter. So he looks towards the higher gain, but we are heedless of the far gain. So grammarian has a higher ambition of pleasing God. He thinks about gains in life after death. Was it not great? Did not he throw on God? He loves the person. God's task to make the heavenly period perfect be earthen. Now he's asking questions. He says, was it not great? So what is great? He's asking you. Did not he throw on God? Then another question, God's task to make the heavenly period perfect the earthen? He says, he's questioning whether the grammarian's approach, this approach that we've just discussed, was it right? Was the grammarian was right in setting his gaze upon those far goals, on those rewards in life after death, and not looking for rewards in this life, not looking for gains in this life? He says, is he not expecting too much of God? Is he not throwing everything on God? Although, then he says in brackets, he loves burden. God's task to make the heavenly period perfect. So he says, it is his belief. Is he believing or is he expecting too much that in the life hereafter, that heavenly period, it will be made perfect for the earthen? The earthen is us. We are made of the earth. We are made of the elements of the earth. So he says, our life will be a perfect life in the heavenly period, in the hereafter. So is it not that the grammarian expected too much of God? Did not he magnify the mind, show clear just what it all meant? Again he puts another question, was the grammarian successful? He's looking at his master's achievements. He says, was he successful in achieving his goals? Was he able to magnify the mind? Was he able to transfer his knowledge to his fellow individuals, to his students? Was he able to show clear just what it all meant? Was he able to pass on this learning, this knowledge, this understanding, these divine attributes, this intellectual capacity? Was he able to pass on all these things to his disciples? So he asks these three questions because remember, this is a dramatic monologue. So the speaker here is reflecting the thoughts that may come in the minds of the listeners also. He has no doubts in the abilities of his master. He's full of praise for them. But in order to clarify, in order to expose more of the character of his master, he puts these questions here because he wants to further reveal his master's personality. He says he would not discount life as fools do here, paid by installment. So after these questions, he answers. He says, he was not a fool. My master was not a fool. He would not discount life. He would not accept a discount in this life, as fools do here, paid by installment. So he would not discount life which is paid by installment. He would not buy life in installments like foolish and ordinary people do here, that they buy different pleasures of life. And so this is a selfish and a greedy approach of the lowly and the ordinary and the inferior people like us, that for small gains we are fulfilling our desires. We are spending our life in order to fulfill those small gains and in order to accomplish those small desires and aims. So he says, but he was not the type. He would not go for those lowly buys. He ventured at higher profits. He went for higher things, greater things, nobler and more spiritual things. He ventured neck or nothing, heaven's success, found or earth's failure. Wilt thou trust death or not? He answered, yes, hence with life's pale lure. Now the disciple tells us that he ventured neck or nothing, heaven's success found or earth's failure. So nothing mattered to him. He was concerned with his work and work alone. Although he had set his eyes upon the hereafter and he hoped to reap the fruits of his hard labor in the hereafter, But he would not think about that during his work. He toiled hard in this life. He worked hard to acquire knowledge, to acquire learning, and to pass it on, and to try and make the world a better place. He ventured neck or nothing. So neck means to do his best, and nothing meaning to make no effort. Heaven's success found or earth's failure. So it did not matter to him that whether he found heaven's success or he was failure, whether he was a failure here in this world, or because he led a lowly existence. He was a poor person. He earned his own meager living. He was not the kind of people who would show off. He led a humble life. He was knowledgeable, but he did not like to become famous. So he was a special person. So these are failures in the eyes of the worldly people, in the eyes of the ordinary people. So he was the earth's failure. He was a failure in the eyes of many ordinary people, for whom the actual success is a worldly success. So he was not bothered also about whether he had earned the heaven's praise, the Lord's praise. He knew that the God's praise rested with those who worked hard and honestly. Will thou trust death or not? The disciple says he would often ask him, do you trust death or not? Do you trust or have belief that when the death will come to you, you will be led on peacefully into another blissful world? The trusting death here means passing over onto a happier life. He said yes, and with life's pale lure. And his answer was yes, that he trusts death. He trusts that death will lead the soul on to a better life. And life for him was like a pale lure. Hence with life's pure, he says, I trust death with life's pale lure. So the life for him was like in front of death, was like a pale attraction. Lure is an attraction. So life held little attraction for him. This worldly life held little attraction, or this mortal life held little appeal to him in front of death. So he was a brave, courageous man. He was not afraid of death also. He did not see death as an end to living, but he saw it as a journey into another kind of living. So he was a believer in that sense, and he held strong faith, and he followed in what he believed in, and he observed the rules of what he had learned from what he had acquired. So he followed a life of rules which he had learned from books, which he had learned in the process of acquiring knowledge. So he was not only the kind of a philosopher, not a kind of an intellectual who only pored over books, but was a theorist in general, had a great deal of knowledge, but was not able to show that all in the practical life. He was a man of action also. This grammarian was a man of action also. Whatever he learned, whatever he acquired, he also made it part of his life also. He practiced it also. So the truth, the value, the judgments, the reality, what he learned in the books, he also learned to apply it to his life. So all the rules that he led his life with, that he still led his life with when he was old, it was all based on the knowledge that he had acquired. That low man seeks a little thing to do, sees it and does it. This high man with a great thing to pursue dies ere he knows it. Or he says that low man seeks a little thing to do. from these lines onwards, Browning is going to give to us the comparison between the low man and the high man. And with low man he uses that. He says that low man. So he's talking about the ordinary people like us. He calls us the low man. And this is used with high man, and this is referring to his master. So he says that low man seeks a little thing to do, sees it and does it. So what is the difference between a low man and a high man? One, he says that a low man, again, sets short-term targets, short-term goals. He desires for little things. His desires are for little and mean things. He doesn't set high targets. He sees that little thing, he desires for that little meaningless thing, and he tries to accomplish it. He tries to grab it, and he goes for it. But he is low, he goes for a lowly little thing. But what does a high man do in contrast? With a great thing to pursue, dies means before, dies before he knows it. And the high man, he doesn't go for little things, he goes for higher things, he goes for greater things, he goes for those long-term goals, he goes beyond the personal. He has goals for the whole community, for the humanity. He has greater things to pursue. His greater lofty ideals are not only centered around himself, but they're centered on how to improve things in the world and in the lives of the people. So he has great thoughts, he has great things to do, he has great plans to follow, to pursue. He says, the words, you see, look at the language. First, in the first part it was a little thing to do. To do is not as emphatic. It's also mean and little. But when he says great thing to pursue, pursue is a much more emphatic word. It's a greater and a more stronger word, and it shows the quality of dedication, motivation required to achieve it. So pursue. So he had aimed to pursue great things, the high man, and he dies before he knows it. And then he says he dies in the pursuit of those things. His whole life is spent in the pursuit of greater things, in the pursuit of greater knowledge, in the pursuit of higher ideals, in the pursuit of higher objectives. Unlike the low man who sees it and does it and goes for it and achieves it, but it is his own single personal aim, and it is to enhance his present, improve his present. And this high man is all his life, his whole life is spent in pursuit of higher, nobler aims. Then further he says, that low man goes on adding 1 to 1, his 100 soon hit. This high man, aiming at 1,000,000, misses an unit. He says the low man, he goes on adding 1 to 1, his hundreds soon hit. What does a low man do? How does he grab money? This is what normally greedy people do, what miserly people do. They are adding 1 to 1, one pleasure and one gain and one profit. They are adding more to it. They've achieved one short goal, one short personal worldly gain, and now they're looking for another. So they're always counting upon their gains. They're only counting upon their money. They're only counting upon their achievements. They're boasting about it also. So they are always counting, adding 1 to 1, and as if they will soon hit their 100 mark. So their aim is to hit 100 marks. Their aim is to become something, really rich in the worldly sense, to have a lot of success in the worldly sense. So they have those mean low targets. But this high man, he says he aims at 1,000,000, whereas this low man aimed at 100, and because he's always counting and adding his blessings, his 100 is soon hit. But what happens to the high man? He says he aims at 1,000,000 and he misses a unit. His aim is at 1,000,000. He does not count the small blessings. He's not counting the blessings, the meager, the small profits that he may get in the present life. His look is upon the blessings of the universe. So he aims at 1,000,000. He aims at a greater profit than the low man, and that is the profit, that is the love and the grace of God, that is the love and the grace of the Lord. So he's aiming at 1,000,000, and he misses only by a unit, meaning he achieves what he aims for. So his aims are higher. Again, Browning has emphasized that his aims are higher. That as a world here should he need the next, let the world mine him. This throws himself on God, and unperplexed, seeking shall find him. He says that, again the low one, that is a low one. He has a world here. Should he need the next, let the world mine him. So he has this casual attitude towards the next life. He has this doubt about the next life. All that he wants is in this world. All that he wants is in this life. He's materialistic, and he does not have the vision. So he wants everything now. He wants everything in the present. He wants everything in this life. And he says, leave the next for the next time. When it will come, we shall see. So let the world mind him. So he's least bothered. But he says that this one, he throws himself on God, and unperplexed, seeking shall find him. And what happens to this one? He throws himself on God. He leaves everything upon God. By this, Browning means that he leaves the worries of this world and that world. He doesn't bother about that. He leaves it. He leaves both the worlds for God. And unperplexed, seeking shall find. And because he's not confused, because he's not perplexed, he's not bothered, he shall find both the worlds, and he shall find God also. So he has a greater objectives. He has greater vision, and he is a kind of man who actually is a winner in both the worlds. And it is not as contrary to the beliefs of these low men, as they are the winners in this worldly life. Browning here tells us that it's men like grammarian who are dedicated, who are pure, who are true, who are honest, and who work with greater aims, greater objectives, with higher aims. They are actually the winners of both the worlds. So, with the throttling hands of death at strife, ground he at grammar, still through the rattle parts of speech were rife. While he could stammer, he settled Hoti's business, let it be. It says, so with the throttling hands of death at strife. Now the disciple tells us that the time of death was near. Death was approaching the grammarian. He was becoming feebler and feebler physically and mentally, weaker and weaker, and the throttling heads, strangling heads, are hands of death. Death here is personified as a human being who's ready to strangle the grammarians and to take his life. So while he struggled with life, strife is to struggle. So while he was struggling with death, meaning as he was about to die, he still went for knowledge. He still went to seek knowledge. Ground he had grammar. This is what the disciple tells us. He was still learning and teaching grammar. Still through the rattle is how one speaks. When the breath is coming out, you're speaking quickly, but not clearly, because the breath is coming out with a rattling sound. So, and also when you go on speaking without much thinking, rapidly, he says through the rattle, through what he would say, parts of speech were rife. Only parts of speech could be understood. So his speech was not audible or clear. And while he could, and sometimes he would stammer. Stammering is when you stop and pause at the word, and the word is not pronounced comfortably. So he would sometimes stammer. He settled Hoti's business. Let be it. Hoti is a Greek word which means because. So he's talking about grammar. So he says, and as well as he could speak, although sometimes he would rattle without much understanding, sometimes he would stammer, but he was able to get across his message. So he was still learning and imparting the knowledge. Properly based gave us a doctrine of the enclitic day, dead from the waist down. Is a word taken from New Testament, and it means therefore, consequently, and then. And the enclitic is a word which is pronounced with little emphasis, and so that it becomes shortened. It's like words like can't, shan't, okay, do not, don't. So these are the contracted words, enclitic words. And day, it is a prefix, a D. D is a prefix. So again you see he's talking about the grammar. Properly based gave us a doctrine of the English. So even in that condition, even when he was struggling with death, even when he was fighting death, even when he was on death's bed, he was able to deliver lectures on grammar, on the enclitic D, dead from the waist down. And at that time, the disciple tells us he was dead from the waist down, meaning he was paralyzed. His body had become paralyzed. So you see, gradually he's telling us how his physical condition left him. But in contrast to the physical condition, he also tells us that his mental condition never changed. It did not become feeble. It was not weak. So you should always bear this in mind when you analyze the character of this grammarian, that his mental strength is shown as resilient, strong, sharp, even on deathbed. But as you shall see, when we are given the images of his failing health, and now we see him crippled, half down, we see him suffered from paralysis of the body, but still giving his lectures, still talking about grammar. It shows that his mind is very much active even now. And then the disciple tells us, well, here's the platform, here's the proper place. Hail to your purliers, all ye high flyers of the feathered rays, swallows and curlews. Now they have reached the top of the hill. Maybe they have reached the summit. He says, here's the platform. Here's the proper place. He sees this place, he looks around, and he says, this is the proper place to give burial to our master. And he will now describe to us why is the place, why does he describe it as a special place or a proper place for his master. He says, hail to your purliers. Purliers refers to the outskirts, the surroundings. Already these hills were on the outskirts of the town. Okay, all ye high flyers of the feathered rays, swallows and curlews. So he's hailing, he's welcoming, he is, because he's gone there, and he meets with these inhabitants of this place. So he hails first to the outskirts, because these hills are on the outskirts of the town, And then he wishes well to the birds, because this part of the hill was inhabited by birds, beautiful birds. He says there were swallows and curlews. Curlews are birds which have got long and slender down curved bills, very long bill they have got in front. So, and he says these feathered race are the birds. High flyers, normally we use this word in today's modern English for high ambitions. But here Browning may be talking about the birds which live and fly about in the high mountains. So he's talking about, you are the higher flyers of the feather, from amongst all the birds, the feathered race. You are the ones, you're the supreme ones, you're the special creatures, you swallows and curlews, because you live on top of the hills. So he is telling us about the sanctity of this place. Here's the top peak. Now he sees the top peak. He says, the multitude below live, for they can there. This man decided not to live, but no, bury this man there. Now he's asking a question towards the end also, but he says the multitude, the common people are in great numbers. They are the multitude. So from amongst so many people, we have very few. From the multitude we have this one grammarian, one sage, one intellectual. So he says the multitude below live, for they can there. Their place is to live in the lowlands. Their place is to live in the plains, with their lowly desires, with their lowly limited designs and plans. But this man decided not to live, but no. So his place is different. His place should be different. Why? Because he did not mean to only live his life like the others, like the lowly people, but he wanted to understand life. He wanted to know life. So he was a different individual. So then he says, bury this man there. Now maybe he's asking his disciples, or the disciples are asking him that should we bury him here on this hilltop? Here's his place. Then he shows his other fellows the place, the ground where they're going to dig the grave and lay the body down. He says, this is the place where meteors shoot, clouds form, lightnings are loosened, stars come and go. Let joy break with the storm, peace let the dew send. Look at the way he's describing the beauty of the place, and look at the grand and the holy status that he's giving to this place. He says, this is a special place. This is a place where the meteors, from where they shoot. Meteors are the shooting stars that we see often in the night sky, going from one end of the sky to the other and falling down to the other end. He says this is a place, this is a hill where the sky meets the earth. So this is a place where the shooting stars pass. This is the shooting star is like a soul. It's a symbol of a soul, and it's a soul who's alighted with knowledge, who's alighted because it is pure and it is sacred. So it's you can connect it to the grammarian himself. So it is a place, it's a special place. Clouds form, he says, it is this place which is always surrounded by clouds. The hilltop is so high above the ground that the clouds cover it from all sides and offer it good protection. And also significant in the idea is a concept that the master's place would be amongst the heavens. It's not with the lowly earthly people like us. It is with the heavens, where the sky, where the earth is reaching the sky. It is meeting the sky. So his place is above. His place is in the heavens, surrounded with the clouds of the heaven. Lightnings are loosened. He says it is here, the hilltop, that the lightnings are flashed. Again, the lightnings may be symbol here of the knowledge that this grammarian may go on dispersing, scattering even after he's dead. Because he must have left back loads of work, loads of writing, loads of books and manuals and whatnot, which would be passed on to his disciples, which would be spread to the rest of the world, and his word would be carried on. Stars come and go, and he says it is this place from where the night stars also start their journey across the sky. So again, there is a reference that people from different parts of the world, they would come to this great grammarian, because so great was his knowledge that they would come to seek knowledge from this great man. So you can imagine any great philosopher or any great intellectual or any great leader in the period, like Plato, Aristotle. We've heard how these people had formed their own small societies, and people would join them from different corners of the world, but only those people who sought knowledge, and only those people who had left the worldly desires, only those people who had said goodbye to the world, they came to these such places, and they improved upon their, they sought knowledge, they improved their learning. So he seeks this special place for this grammarian, for their master, because he says this is a heavenly abode. It is a heavenly place. It is a place where the earth meets the sky. It is not the normal place where the normal individuals, people, ordinary people, ignorant people like us are buried, but his place is among the heavens. So he will be buried where the earth meets the heavens. Let joy break with the storm. So then he says joy, maybe he sees a storm coming. He says the storm that brews, that will bring joy. Peace, let the dew send. Then he's asking, he's asked the storm to bring about joy, to give happiness. And then he asks peace to send dew, so that the ground becomes moist, and it will keep the body of their master safe. So he gives a picture of a place of grandness which suits this grand man. Lofty designs must close in like effects, loftily lying, leave him still loftier than the world suspects, living or dying. He says lofty designs must close in like effects. He says he had lofty designs in his life. In his lifetime, he had lofty designs, lofty aims, lofty ambitions, and he's lying loftily also. He's lying down loftily also. So his life was lofty, and his death is also lofty. So he reaped what he harvested, what he sowed. So his harvest or his reaping is according to what he sowed in his life. He led a lofty life, lofty existence, a noble, sacred life, working always for others, and not sparing thought for his own needs and for his own life. He says now he's also lying loftily. He has the greater stature even now, which normal, lowly, ordinary people can not even think of. Leave him still loftier than the world suspects, living and dying. And then the last two lines encapsulate the humility. The humility that from the opening Browning tells us was a mark of this great man. He says even when he lived, he was unsuspected by the world as a great man. The world did not honor him as a great one. He was humble. He did not like to show off. He did not like to boast of his knowledge or to prate about his knowledge. And so the world did not suspect him as a great man. And he says, but yet he was special, yet he was lofty then. And in dying also, he says, the world will never know the actual worth of this man. The world will never understand or recognize the truth or the place of this world. But he says, his existence, his life as well as death, both are noble, both were for noble purpose, and both were sacred. So in that sense, he pays a high tribute to his master. And if you will allow me to say, though in the whole of the poem gives you at times contrasting images. I say contrasting because in places the physical health, the failing physical health was contrasted with the still agile mental health. So with these contrasting images, and then with the disciples' own understanding of the grammarian's thoughts and what he saw from the life of the grammarian himself, we get a picture of the kind of character that this grammarian had. We see that he was humble by nature. We see that he was hardworking by nature. We see that he was a brave man. We see that he did not care much about the harsh conditions that he was living in. We see that he was selfless. We see that he did not seek acknowledgement for his efforts or for his learning or for his knowledge. We see that he is a firm believer. We see that he has firm faith in the hereafter. We see that goal and the worldly desires and the materialistic needs do not matter to him. We see that he is a spiritual person at heart. And we see that he does not go for short gains or short profits. And we see, most importantly, that he does not use his knowledge or his learning to improve his material conditions. He does not improve his knowledge to make academies or to sell knowledge. In fact, he imparts knowledge freely. And that is why he gets this complete respect from his disciples, from his students, that they carry him upon their shoulders from the town, and they take him high above this hilltop or the mountain to bury him. Such is the great respect that they have for their master. But that is because he led a selfless and dedicated and a motivated life. And he had dedicated his life completely for his people and for his society and for his community. And he did not care much when he did not get any reward in return in this life. As we see that we are told repeatedly throughout the poem that when the disciples asked him for reward, his answer was that he did not care for these rewards, these temporary rewards, for these short rewards, for these installments as he called them, for these small profits as he called them, but he hoped for greater reward, which would come from the Lord, from the God. And it was this that kept him, his spirit alive, his soul alive, and that kept him going till his last breath. As we have shown that even when he had this paralysis of body, this grammarian had gone on to improve his learning, to impart learning also. So he was a great man. So just to give you a brief summary and the analysis of the poem before we call an end to this lecture today. A Grammarian's Funeral is a dramatic monologue set in shortly after the Renaissance in Europe. Now this is an important point, The Renaissance was followed by the Enlightenment period, which revolutionized thoughts or thinking patterns in Europe. The Renaissance, as you know, is a rebirth of learning in Europe, which took place as a result of the fall of Constantinople. For Christians or the European community, it was a fall of Constantinople, but for Muslims, it was a victory in Turkey. So the Muslims took a hold of Constantinople or Turkey from the Christians or the Europeans, and the Europeans were forced to fled. But since Constantinople was a center of learning and knowledge, with most of the universities and most of the libraries also centered there, they couldn't take away most of the written material, the learners there. But when they fled from Constantinople, came down to the European cities, they brought that knowledge with them, and then they opened different institutions or different branches in the existing institutions to spread that knowledge. And with that came a revival of learning, the Enlightenment period, as we call it. And this was a period where learning in all fields, or knowledge in all fields, was discovered. And man made progress in science, in psychology, in physics, in biology, in botany, in philosophy, you name it. But the progress was made in all periods, and it was a period, this Enlightenment period, which is remembered as a period of intellectual refinement, as a period of intellectual seriousness. So it is a period which is marked by high rationalism, by intellectual rationalism, and it is at this time that we see the religious and the moral values on the decline. So it is in the backdrop of all of this, in the backdrop of this Enlightenment, this great movement in the European history, and in the backdrop of the Victorian dilemma, where the religious and the moral values were receding, and the scientific rationalism was replacing it, taking its place. It is this poem becomes significant. It is in the backdrop of all of this that this poem becomes significant, because you see, this is Browning gives us an image of a grammarian, of a scholar here, who is a learned person, who is a master in all disciplines of knowledge. But at the same time, he's a spiritual leader also. He does not shun the religious values. He still stands firmly to the religious dogmas. So he gives us a picture of knowledge compatible with religious dogmas. So it is a significant poem when studied or looked at from that point of view. It's a mourning poem sung by a disciple of a noble grammarian who passed away after spending whole of life in learning new things. This is just a recap or a summary of the poem. The poem is about the life history of the grammarian as seen by the disciple. It is in the form of a movement from plains to the hilltop, where they plan to bury the grammarian. I'm giving you this summary deliberately because the poem is long and is slightly complex. But at this point you need to keep in mind what I had said earlier on, how the journey is symbolic, how this journey from the town to the hilltop, how it is significant. Okay? They walk in darkness towards the mountain, and during the walk the grammarian's disciple sketches the biography and the achievements of his master. So he gives us a sketch of his life and of his achievements. The grammarian's disciples wish their master should be buried in the mountain where there is culture and learning. The mountain here represents greatness and higher thoughts. I will repeat this point. Now the grammarian's disciples wish their master should be buried in the mountain where there is culture and learning. The mountain here represents greatness and higher thoughts. It is a place where the sun shines first and later it passes down. And this is what we've just seen. And we've seen how they decide that the hilltop or the mountaintop is the best place to bury their master, because the mountain represents the greatness and the higher thoughts that their master was an emblem of. The grammarian spent all his young age reading and gaining knowledge. He was interested in knowing the mystery of the world and human life. So his aim, and you have to remember this, his knowledge was not a useless kind of knowledge. His aim, his knowledge was with an aim. And he tried to understand and unravel the mystery of the world and to understand the human life better. So it was a loftier, nobler purpose than most of us, most of the ordinary people who attain knowledge for short gains. But his was nobler and loftier purpose and more sacred, because he wanted to understand human life and to understand the world around us. Even in his old age, he wanted to know the views of poets and other great scholars. So, like we saw that even in old age, the grammarian did not leave his habit of acquiring knowledge. He believed in enjoying life after death, which is the eternal life. He kept reading books without a stop. After reading books, he wished to read the commentaries and criticism of some books. He wished to read until the last minute of his life. And this is what gave him joy, what brought him joy. He would read without stopping. And even after he had finished reading books, he would then go on to read the commentaries, and he would not stop until he had learned everything by heart. And we saw that he was poring over his grammar books even at his deathbed. Now the grammarian, before beginning to live his life, planned for his life. This is a very significant point in his life. He was not like the other individuals who only wanted to live their life and there was no planning involved because there was no aim involved. So he planned for his life. The grammarian fully believed in God, and thereby he planned for his happy life after death. Ordinary men would say that time keeps moving and they would start enjoying their life, but the grammarian believed that in life after death and in the concept that soul has no end. So the others, while the other ordinary ignorant people were trying to collect all pleasures in this worldly life, it is like they don't believe in the hereafter. So they are trying to have all pleasures, all happiness in this life only. All the energies are focused on getting the best out of this life. But the grammarian was a different man. He was a spiritual person also. He was not just a knowledgeable scholar. He was deeply spiritual and deeply religious. He believed that the soul passes on, it moves on, and there is another existence, there is another life. He was not narrow in his thoughts. He did have small ambitions. He was not narrow in his thoughts. He did not have small ambitions. He did not draw a small circle around him. Only ordinary men would believe in short gains and profits, and they would lose the bargain during the judgment day. So he was a spiritual and a religious person. He did not have small ambitions like ordinary men. He did not draw narrow circles around him. He did not limit or confine his knowledge or his understanding or his desires. And he went for higher, loftier profits and a greater bargain on the day of judgment. So we get a picture of a very, very special character, of a very different character. The poem we see is also an example of Browning's skill of describing characters through the dramatic monologue. After the character sketch that we've just discussed, this is how we evaluate the whole poem. the poem offers us how skillful Browning is at using his dramatic monologues, and through those dramatic monologues how skillfully he reveals the characters. And I told you in the beginning that in the dramatic monologue he does not just reveal the character the speaker is describing, but also the speaker himself. So although we do get an autobiographical sketch, we do get a biographical sketch of the grammarian, we get a sketch of his life, we get a sketch of his special life, but we all at the same time, what we also see, but at the same time, we also notice that the disciple's character is also unfolding before us. We see the reverence, we see the gratitude, we see the respect, we see the esteem, we see the honor, we see the love, and we see all of these feelings that he and the other students may have for their leader, for their teacher, for their master. Because in describing their master, he was often describing the talk that he used to have with his master also. So he remembers every detail that his master ever gave to him. He remembers his last few days. He remembers how even when his health was failing, the master still strove on, worked hard, and completely gave up his life to the work, regardless of his health. So we see that the disciples are full of awe, and that is why they are ready to honor him, and that is why they are ready to go to any great length to give him a proper burial. So we are also introduced into the workings or mind of these disciples. We see how impressed they were with this selfless attitude of their master or their grammarian. So this was the first poem of Browning that I did with you, and in the next lecture I will look up at another poem with you. That is also an example of a dramatic monologue, and in that poem we shall see that this technique is used in a more intelligent and in a more sophisticated manner. And it appears to be more polished and more focused in that poem. So we come to an end of this lecture today, and I hope you have understood how dramatic monologue is used to make plain the characteristics, make plain or to bring out the traits and the qualities of the characters in the poem. And I hope you would agree that with this technique, with the help of this technique, Browning has been able to achieve in this poem, and that is the description of the character of the grammarian. So we come to the end of the lecture today. In the next lecture, we shall analyze the next poem, that is My Last Touches. I take leave now for now, and I shall meet you again in the next lecture. Thank you.